Welcome to our second video this week for Biology 2225L Abdominal Circulation. I'm going to show you the blood vessels that are on our list of terms on some of the models that we have in the lab. Unfortunately, we can't get into CNM anymore, so the day the closure was announced, I had to bring as many of the models home as I could, and I didn't quite get all of them, so I'm only going to be able to show you the blood vessels on the ones that I did bring home. So we're going to start with this urinary model. You might remember this model from the urinary system, and I focus on it because it does have blood vessels in it as well. And so focusing on the arteries to begin with, what we're seeing here is the abdominal aorta in red. This little hole here represents the celiac trunk. It's really unfortunate that they didn't just do a little bit more for this model and show the trunk coming out and splitting into three branches. So all we actually have is just a little hole, basically, where the celiac trunk would be. As we come down, the next major vessel that we see coming out would be the superior mesenteric artery. They do not show the suprarenal arteries that would go to the adrenal glands, but they would be right here somewhere. They do show, however, the renal arteries, these red vessels that are serving the kidneys. As we come down on the aorta, we have a pair of gonadal arteries. These two small arteries here would be the gonadals, one there and one here. And then as we continue on down, the last major branch we would see would be the inferior mesenteric artery before we then get the branching into the common iliacs. So that would be the arterial pattern that we look for, at least on this model. As for the veins, we have the inferior vena cava sitting right next to the abdominal aorta, and what we clearly see are two renal veins heading out to the kidneys. Once again, they do not show us the suprarenal veins that would be here for some reason. As we continue on down, we see the right gonadal vein coming up from below and joining with the inferior vena cava. Remember, in the veins, there's no symmetry for the gonadal veins, because on the left side, remember, the gonadal vein comes up from the gonad and joins with the renal vein and then over into the inferior vena cava. This model does not show any of the portal circulation, so that's pretty much all we can see on this particular model. The next vessel or model we have to look at is our torso model, and our torso model is fairly good for the arteries, not so great for the veins. So what we have is, I've had to remove some of the organs, the stomach and the liver, for instance, to see beneath them. And what we see up there is the esophagus poking through the diaphragm, and we see the vena cava poking through the diaphragm there. They don't really show the aorta very well. Presumably that's behind the diaphragm at this point. We have the spleen over here, and so what we can clearly see in terms of what's here right now is we can see a splenic, well, actually before we get to that, we have a celiac or a celiac trunk. And remember, the celiac trunk gives rise to three vessels. It gives rise to a splenic artery, this red one going out towards the spleen, a left gastric artery right here, this little curly Q would be the left gastric artery going to the stomach, that would be right here, and then the hepatic artery, which is going to head out towards where the liver would have been. So right here we see the three branches of the celiac trunk. And before I remove the pancreas, I want to also point out that there's a blue vessel here behind the splenic artery. That would be the splenic vein. Okay, now not much else is visible at this point until we essentially remove some of the small intestine, and we can expose some things by coming down a little farther The first thing I want to point out is, before I remove it, we've got the colon here with the mesenteries. And what we can see very nicely in the mesenteries is associated with the descending colon on this side. We see red and bluish vessels. These would be the inferior mesenteric artery and vein. Inferior mesenteric artery and vein, because they're associated with this descending colon. Over here on the right side, associated with the ascending colon, of course, would be the superior mesenteric arteries and veins, again shown in red versus blue. If we track up the superior mesenteric veins, we see they all join into one big superior mesenteric vein that's going to eventually become the hepatic portal vein that will go up into the liver, but we don't see that quite here because the pancreas is in the way. Now if I take off the pancreas and the colon, we see what's left underneath there. What's left is the little bit that we can still see that's behind all the organs. So let's see what we've got here. Again, the abdominal aorta poking through the diaphragm. We've got the celiac trunk with its 3 branches. You can always make out the celiac trunk even if it's cut, if they show the 3 branches. As we come down from there, then this would have been the superior mesenteric vein right there, coming out forward. Here we see where the kidneys are now, they're retroperitoneal, they were behind. And so what we can see is a renal artery heading out to this left kidney, and a renal artery going out to the right kidney. Coming on down, we've got the 2 gonadal veins, arteries, very thin gonadal arteries. And for some reason, they have neglected to put the inferior mesenteric artery, which would be right in this region somewhere. So they showed it on the mesentery that I just took off, but they neglected to show the trunk of the vessel, which would be right here. And then, of course, again, we get the split into the common iliacs and then external and internal iliacs. As for the vena cava, they have cut it here, so we don't see where the hepatic veins drain into the inferior vena cava. The model doesn't show either of the suprarenal vessels, arteries or veins. We do see the suprarenal vein on this side, So we don't see the suprarenal vein over on the right side, but we do see the suprarenal vein here serving the adrenal gland on this left side. And notice, remember, the suprarenal vein does not drain into the vena cava. Instead, it goes directly into the renal vein coming in from this kidney. And we do see the renal vein on this right side as well. As for the gonadal veins, again, here's a gonadal vein coming up from the pelvic cavity, emptying into the inferior vena cava. Again, on the left side, the asymmetry with the gonadal vein joining with the renal vein. So that's pretty much all we can see on this model as well. So what we've not seen very well up to this point is the portal circulation. We have a couple of models that you might remember from when we did digestive anatomy that are somewhat decent for showing the portal circulation. So let's orient ourselves first to what we're looking at here. This is a portion of the digestive system in the vicinity of the duodenum. Let me just move some models around here a little bit. And so what we're looking at here is, of course, in brownish red, a piece of the liver, where the liver would be the gallbladder with the cystic duct and the common bile duct, leading down to the duodenum. Here's the duodenum with the plicae circularis, the corkscrew folding inside. This pebbly organ, of course, would be the pancreas with the pancreatic duct inside. The spleen always at the end of the pancreas. And we've got the 2 kidneys, the right kidney and the left kidney, and the suprarenal or adrenal glands sitting on top. So that just gives you an idea of where we are. Now, as far as what arteries can we see here, the first thing you might notice is that we can see, if we look back here, the celiac trunk. So again, what would be sitting right here where the pipe cleaner is, this is where the aorta would be, running up and down. And so the celiac trunk is coming out of that aorta, and we see the typical three branches. The smallest vessel is always the left gastric artery. This artery heading out towards the spleen is the splenic artery. Travels right along the top of the pancreas. And then we've got the hepatic artery, which was going to eventually head out to the liver. So we can see that celiac trunk, and then as we come down, we should be able to see the superior mesenteric artery right down here. This would all be the superior mesenteric artery as it comes out of the aorta back there. And this again is going to serve the small intestine and most of the large intestine. We do see a glimpse of an adrenal artery or suprarenal arteries here, these red vessels here. And again, we don't see how they connect up to the rest of the circulation, but just by virtue of being nestled in the adrenal gland, we know that would have to be the suprarenal artery. Okay, now as far as veins go, of course these would be the suprarenal veins as well in the adrenal glands, suprarenal veins. We can't see much in terms of venous drainage from the front side. We actually have to turn around and go to the back side. One vein we can see right here sitting next to the superior mesenteric artery is the superior mesenteric vein, which is draining blood back in from the intestines. But we need to turn the model around to see the portal system in some detail. So as we turn it around, now you have to sort of visualize yourself on the back side of the body, looking posteriorly. And so here we see, here we really don't see very well the vena cava at all. We do see the aorta. This would be the aorta here. And so these openings would be, if you can imagine, if there was an aorta here, this is the celiac trunk, again with its three branches. And this would be the superior mesenteric artery coming out of the aorta, which doesn't exist. As far as the veins go, we've got the splenic vein coming in from the spleen. And unfortunately, this model cuts it off. Normally, there'd be an inferior mesenteric vein coming up to join it. And eventually, that splenic vein and inferior mesenteric vein would come across and join up with this vessel right here. Again, this vessel coming from below is the superior mesenteric vein. And as it comes up and joins with this vessel coming in from the left, in this case, because now we're looking posteriorly, this then they'd all fuse together to make the hepatic portal vein. And that would then, of course, send dirty blood up into the liver. And so if you look very carefully, what you might notice is that at the base of the liver, you're going to have three vessels entering the liver. You're going to have an hepatic artery sending clean blood, a portal vein, hepatic portal vein sending so-called dirty blood from the abdominal organs. And then you're also going to have this tube, which is, remember, the common bile duct. I point this out because these three tubes that enter the liver eventually branch and branch and branch into smaller vessels and ultimately lead to all the microscopic triads that we talked about in liver histology. Remember, a triad consists of three vessels: a portal venule, which ultimately connects to this portal vein, a hepatic arteriole carrying oxygenated blood, which ultimately derives from this hepatic artery, and a bile ductule, which is carrying bile from the liver down to the either gallbladder or duodenum, and of course that ultimately connects with this common bile duct. So the same three vessels that make up the microscopic triad are seen here basically at macroscopic level, the triad. So that's one model we have. We have another model that's very similar to this. It's a little bit smaller, but I do think that it shows the details a little bit better than the one we just looked at. So our final model for this section, again, that shows the portal circulation plus some of the other abdominal circulation, is this one. Just to orient you, same thing. We've got a spleen at the tip of a pancreas. So once again, spleen at the tip of the pancreas. The duodenum is right here. What we don't see on this one is any evidence of the of the liver or the gallbladder. That's not been included. Okay, so what do we have? Again, just in terms of the vessels we can see right off the bat, again, imagine that there would be a aorta, abdominal aorta sitting behind here. And so what we see coming off that abdominal aorta, once again, is a celiac trunk that gives rise to three vessels. The smallest vessel always is the left gastric artery. The one going out towards the spleen, of course, would be the splenic artery. And the one going towards the liver would be the hepatic artery. Hepatic artery. So there's your celiac trunk again. And once again, if we come below the pancreas, we see down below we have a red vessel that peeks out from below the pancreas. That is the superior mesenteric artery. And of course, right next to it would be the superior mesenteric vein, paralleling it, bringing blood back in from the small intestines and large intestine through the transverse colon. Again, as far as the veins go, we kind of have to turn it around once again to get a good view of the veins in this region. I like this model better because it doesn't cut the splenic vein, and it does show you how things hook up to make the portal vein. So once again, we're looking at everything from behind. The abdominal aorta would be right here. The vena cava would be next to it. Neither one of those is seen in this particular view. There's the celiac trunk again, with its three branches coming forward from the aorta. There's the superior mesenteric artery again going down towards the intestines. But what I'll focus on from this view is the portal circuit. Remember, what we have is a splenic vein coming in from the spleen. Coming up from beneath, the most common pattern is for an inferior mesenteric vein to fuse with the splenic vein. Those continue over towards the liver, which would be in this area. And we've got the superior mesenteric vein coming in from below, right next to the superior mesenteric artery. And notice the splenic vein and the superior mesenteric fuse together to form the hepatic portal vein that's now going to send all that blood up into the liver for processing. And I particularly like this model because that triad I was talking about, those three vessels that enter the liver, you can see them sitting side by side here, where in red you see the hepatic artery carrying oxygenated clean blood. The largest vessel is the portal vein, and the green vessel to the right is the common bile duct. And again, those are the same three vessels at the macroscopic level that ultimately lead to the microscopic triads that course throughout the liver. So those are our models for abdominal circulation. I think we've managed to see most of the vessels between all the models that are on our list of terms. Again, the one vessel that we really can't make out usually are the hepatic veins. The models just don't show those, but I believe everything else that was on our list of terms we managed to take a look at. Until next time, take care, have a good weekend, and we will see you next time with the endocrine system.